ask what time it is a very common question we hear day to day. It's almost instinctive that when we hear the question, we look to our watch, even if we haven't put one on. But did you know that the railway helped in the way that we calculate time? So let's go back in time to the very beginning and let me show you. For many centuries, timekeeping was not really a relevant thing. Time was mostly dependent on the movement of the sun and the changing of the seasons. For many, the concept of time was sunrise, midday and sunset. The UK and some countries used the sun's movements and the seasons to create elaborate calendars. The calendar we use to determine the length of a year, the Gregorian calendar, the calendar we use today, was only introduced in October 1582, less than 150 years before the first steam engines. If there was ever a need to determine the passage of time, there were methods. For example, if monks needed to know a determined amount of time between praying, they would then light a candle or use a sand glass. It was thought that if a candle was the same size and width, then theoretically it would burn for the same length of time. It was crude, but it kind of worked. The candles though were made by hand, and the flame was affected by outside environment and imperfections, so it was really inaccurate. And if the flame went out unnoticed, basically you were royally stuck. It was the Greeks that established how to separate the sun's movements and accurately separate the sun's cycle into 24 equal parts, or hours. And this breakthrough led to the invention of the sundial. The sundial was a vast improvement, and they were installed up and down the country. In fact, some could say the sundial did the job of time a little too well. The sundial was only accurate to its location. For example, if you and a friend read the sundials in Lowestoft in Suffolk, the most easterly point of the UK mainland, and Land's End, the most westerly point of the UK mainland, at exactly the same time, you would find they were about 30 minutes out. In 1792, in order to help regulate time better, local mean time was introduced. Instead of relying on each sundial individually, they would calculate all the time fluctuations and average them out. As town clocks became more common, people became less reliant on sundials, but because each parish or town worked out local time on their own, there was no uniformity up and down the country. Once again, many viewed this as little consequence. It was more accurate than what they had before, and many rarely left their towns, so it was little concern. The only inconvenience the local time zones caused was to the mail coaches taking mail up and down the country. The guard on the coaches would carry timepieces, which they would have to adjust depending on the town or city that they visited. The timepieces would gain 15 minutes when travelling west and lose 15 minutes when travelling east every 24 hours. In the 1800s, the UK was flung headlong into the Industrial Revolution. Inventors such as Trevithick, Brunel and Stephenson were wanting to put the pedal down on getting the country moving, and pressure was being put on local time. New ways to communicate, the telegraph, was allowing messages to be transmitted in mere minutes, meaning that for some, sending a message in one town on, let's say, Saturday for example, another town would receive the message Friday night according to their own unique time. As the railways exploded on the scene, they too were caught in this weird local time slip. Guards would have to adjust their watches at every station. 6 p.m. at one station could mean 5:30 at another, and with the railways ever expanding, these simple time slips were causing havoc with many near misses. The railway companies knew it was only a matter of time before one near miss became a fatal disaster. The answer came in the most unusual of sources. At the Greenwich Observatory, local astronomer and timekeeper John Henry Belleville saw the time problem as a golden opportunity. Using a chronometer nicknamed Arnold that was given to him and was accurate to 1/10 of a second, he set the time to Greenwich Mean Time and went from place to place offering to set the time to his time, for a fee of course. But some may ask, why pay for something that could be set for free? The clocks at the time that was set to Greenwich were the most accurate time around. In fact, he was so popular, he offered a subscription service and soon had over 200 subscribers. He would pass this business to his daughter Ruth, who became famous as the Greenwich Time Lady. In 1840, the first railway company to adopt London time was the Great Western Railway. It broke the ground in timekeeping and ordered that all of its timetables must be set to London time, regardless of the mean time in the area. Other railways quickly took notice, but because they were all individual companies, only an Act of Parliament could order them to adopt the new time universally. The Liverpool and Manchester Railway knew this and took their views to Parliament to try to petition the government to order it. The government refused, and the Railway Clearinghouse had to step in. They recommended that all railway stations adopt the London time. The larger railways adopted the time straight away. By 1848, the northern stations had adopted it, but it wasn't law, so some opposed the new time changes. Some companies refused to adopt the new changes at all and wanted to stick to local time. Trains travelling east to west appeared to be going slower than those going west to east. People were missing trains, and clocks had to have 2 separate minute hands to try to accommodate. No matter how much the other railways and the observatory begged, the local time railways refused to budge. The fight between local and London time would continue for 30 years. By then, the government had had enough. The public were grumbling. The railways were in turmoil. Watches and timekeeping devices were easier to obtain, and they constantly had to be adjusted. Writing timetables had become a nightmare. Telegraphs were arriving late or early when they had been sent on time, and time companies like Ruth and Johns were making a tidy sum on the sale of time, but were selling their own version of time based on local clocks and inaccurate instruments. They brought in the definition of time bill in 1890, forcing every timepiece to be set to the well-established London time, with all other local times abolished. Finally, time was standardised around the UK. But what of John's and Ruth's business? Well, the new Act stopped every competitor in their tracks and shut them down overnight, and telegraphs could be sent from Greenwich with accurate times. But the people loved the tried and tested methods that Ruth and her family had provided, and their business continued to flourish. Ruth would walk every day to the observatory to make minute adjustments to her chronometer and take the accurate time to the waiting people in the city below. The subscribers would then adjust their clocks to her time, which in turn would allow others to set their own pocket watches and clocks as well. Ruth was literally the mother of time and provided the service right up until the 1940s, when she was well into her 80s. The railways took the setting of time very seriously. Even before the invention of the wristwatch, many would carry a pocket watch. In the Railway Regulations 1953, it is stated that drivers, guards, firemen, signalmen and station staff must synchronise their watches to the station clock every day. Many would meet on the station to synchronise watches. Henry and Ruth's Arnold timepiece is still around today. It was left to the worshipful company of watchmakers, and the pocket watch is on proud display at the Clockmakers Museum, which is part of the Science Museum and preserved for the nation. Ruth's efforts were rewarded as she was given a tidy pension as a thank you for quite literally being the mother of time and keeping the entire country right on schedule.